In 1933, a widow in Dayton, Ohio was feeding 5 children on $4 a week. She had no job, no savings, no government check coming. She had something better. She had 30 ways to make money that her neighbors had already forgotten. Number 7 on this list earned her more in a single Saturday than her husband had made in a week at the factory. Number 14 built such a fierce reputation in her neighborhood that customers walked past 3 competitors to reach her door. And number 1, the method at the top of this list, is the most completely erased economic skill in American history, and the one that still works today exactly as it did in 1933. Here is what nobody tells you about the 1930s. The people who survived were not the ones who waited for things to get better. They were the ones who remembered how money actually worked before corporations decided to be the only ones allowed to make it. These 30 side hustles were not emergency measures. They were normal economic behavior for ordinary Americans before the modern economy taught them to forget. Before we start, hit subscribe, because what you are about to hear is not history, it is a manual. Let us count them down. Number 30, the neighborhood knife sharpening route. A good whetstone cost 15 cents. A leather strop cost nothing if you cut it from an old belt. Your grandfather walked his block every Saturday morning with those 2 things in a canvas bag and a hand-lettered cardboard sign. Kitchen knives were expensive, and nobody threw them away. A properly sharpened knife stayed sharp for months if maintained, but most households had no idea how to put an edge back on a blade that had gone dull. He charged 5 cents a knife. On a good Saturday in a dense neighborhood, he sharpened 30 to 40 blades and came home with $1.50 to $2. $2 in 1933 had the purchasing power of roughly $40 today. He needed nothing but knowledge and time. Number 29, taking in laundry. The equipment was a wash tub, a washboard, a wringer, a clothesline, and strong arms. Working families, where both adults held jobs, had no time to do their own wash. Elderly residents could not manage heavy wet laundry. Rooming houses needed linens, turned around fast. Your grandmother washed, wrung, dried, and pressed for 3 to 5 families every week. She charged by the bundle. A standard week's laundry for a working man ran 15 to 20 cents. She handled 4 bundles a day when business was good. The trick was the starch. Commercial starch produced collars and shirt fronts so crisp that customers came back every week without being asked. She made her starch from boiling potato water and a tablespoon of cornstarch, and it cost her nothing. First, pattern break. Numbers 28 through 26. The household production routes. Kitchen garden surplus. Sewing and alterations. The egg and butter route. Your grandmother understood that what her household already produced was worth more than she was charging for it, if she charged for it at all. A seed packet costing 10 cents produced 50 pounds of tomatoes. Sold from the front porch at market price, a productive summer garden generated $2 to $4 a month in surplus, on top of eliminating the family's vegetable bill. The Singer treadle. Sewing machine she bought in 1928 for $12 was still running in 1967. Altering coats at 15 cents, dresses at a dime, children's hand-me-downs at a nickel apiece. 8 hens in the backyard coop and 2 crocks of churned butter supplied 12 households every Friday morning on a subscription basis before anyone had a word for that model. 3 routes, all operated from the home. All built on assets the family already owned. None of them required a single dollar of startup capital. Number 25, home baking for sale. Bread baking requires flour, water, salt, yeast, an oven, and knowledge. Your grandmother had all 5. She baked 12 to 16 loaves every Tuesday and Friday. Her neighbors bought them still warm for 8 cents a loaf. The flour for a loaf of bread cost 2 cents in 1933. 8 cents in return meant a 4-cent profit per loaf. Every loaf. 16 loaves twice a week brought in $1.28 in profit. Every week, without leaving the kitchen. She also sold pies. A full pie ran 25 cents. She sold 6 every Saturday. The commercial bakeries could not match her on price and could not touch her on flavor. Number 24, shoe repair. A last, a hammer, a tube of contact cement, and a supply of leather and rubber soles. That was the entire business. Shoes cost $1.50 to $3 in the 1930s. Resoling a worn-out pair cost 25 cents. The math was obvious to anyone trying to make a dollar last. Your grandfather handled repairs out of a wooden bench in the garage. A full resole with new heels ran 30 cents. A patch on a split upper cost a dime. The trick was the edge finish. A properly burnished edge on a leather sole looked better than the original. Customers noticed. They told their friends. By 1935, he had a 2-week backlog. Number 23, taking in boarders. A spare bedroom was income if you were willing to manage it. Your grandmother set a rate of $8 to $10 a month for room and board. 2 meals a day. Linens washed weekly. She ran 2 boarders at a time through the worst years of the Depression. That was $16 to $20 a month in reliable income from rooms that were otherwise empty. The house rules were posted on a card in each room. No smoking in the bedroom. No guests after 9. No cooking on the premises. She chose her boarders by references. She kept 2 boarders for over 7 years. The discipline was in the selection. Before we continue, if you are finding this documented and practical rather than speculated, that is exactly what this channel is built for. Subscribe, and these investigations will keep finding you. Second pattern break. Numbers 22 through 17. The physical and technical routes. Coal delivery, ice delivery, hauling and moving, junk and scrap collection. Watch and clock repair. Photography development. Your grandfather knew that in a neighborhood economy, a strong back, a reliable vehicle, and 1 technical skill were worth more than a bank account. Coal paid 2 cents a pound cost and 3 cents resold by the bushel. Ice ran the same margin on 50-pound blocks delivered to households that could not order a full ton. Hauling household goods for families relocating or evicted cleared $1.50 to $3 per load. Scrap metal paid 2 cents per pound for iron and 5 cents for copper. The yard provided a reliable buyer every week. The watchmaker's loop and a set of screwdrivers costing under $1, combined with 3 years of apprenticed knowledge, produced 8 to 12 repair jobs a week at 50 cents to $1 each. A 48-hour photo development service ran from a basement darkroom built for $4 in materials. It served 40 regular customers who brought a roll every 2 to 4 weeks at 15 cents per roll and 3 cents per print. 6 routes, all built on either physical reliability or a single specialized skill. Every one of them filled a gap that no large business had bothered to fill because the neighborhoods were too small and the margins too thin. Your grandfather was not too small for them. Number 16, teaching music and arithmetic. Your grandmother played piano. Not professionally. Well enough to teach. She charged 15 cents a lesson. She taught 12 students a week, 2 days after school and Saturday morning. That was $1.80 a week reliably without leaving the house. She also taught arithmetic to children who were struggling in school, which their parents preferred to hiring a professional tutor who charged more and cared less. The difference between a Depression-era side hustle and a failed one was reputation. She gave every student one-on-one free lesson before accepting them. Parents who saw results sent their neighbors. By 1937, she had a waiting list. The waiting list was the business. Everything before it was marketing. Number 15. The neighborhood lending library. Books were a luxury in the Depression years. Libraries existed, but were often too far, too limited, or too crowded. Your grandmother maintained a private lending library of 200 books from a shelf in the front room. She charged 1 cent per day per book, or a flat 5 cents per week for unlimited borrowing. She selected carefully. No damaged books, no dull books. She read everything she lent. On a good week, 80 books were circulating at 1 cent per day each. That was 80 cents a week from a shelf of books she had acquired over years at 1 and 2 cents each from church sales and estate lots. The business required no equipment, no materials, and no storefront. It required taste. Taste is still free, and it is still a competitive advantage that no corporation can replicate at scale. Number 14. Typewriting and letter writing services. Most American adults in 1933 had completed less than 8 years of formal schooling. Business correspondence, legal letters, and official applications required a literacy and a formality that many working people could not produce on their own. Your grandmother charged 10 cents per page for typed business letters. A legal document or application drafted from scratch cost a flat 25 cents. She owned a second-hand Underwood typewriter purchased at an estate sale for $3. The customers who found her were not embarrassed. They were practical. They needed a letter that would be taken seriously, and they knew they could not write one themselves. She kept their secrets, and they sent their neighbors. Within 18 months, she had enough regular clients that she turned away more work than she accepted. We are halfway through. If you have made it this far, you are exactly the kind of person this channel is built for. The final methods are the ones that went furthest underground, the ones most completely erased from what we think of as normal economic life. Leave a comment below naming a side hustle from your own family history. The next investigation often starts in those comments. Third pattern break. Numbers 13 through 3. The knowledge economy roots. Midwifery. Home dentistry. Herbal medicine. Practical nursing. Produce arbitrage. Furniture repair and refinishing. Fishing and wild game for market. Rag and textile collection. Portrait photography. Custom candy making. Evening literacy teaching. These 11 routes converted knowledge or nearly free raw materials into reliable income without a storefront, a license, or a bank loan. Your great-grandmother delivered 63 babies, pulled teeth at 50 cents a pull, sold elderberry syrup at 10 cents a jar, and willow bark tea at a nickel a packet. Nurse Practice Acts and Dental Practice Acts progressively made each of these streams legally complicated through the 1930s and 40s. What was removed was not the skill. It was the permission to be paid for it without institutional approval. Your grandfather woke at 4:30, bought underpriced produce at the wholesale market, and resold it to corner grocers at 40 to 60% margin 3 days a week for 11 years. He stripped and refinished furniture from salvaged lumber. He charged $3 for a table and 4 chairs that cost him 40 cents in materials. Your grandmother sorted rags by material type and sold them to the dealer every 3 weeks. She offered family portrait sessions for $1, including 2 finished prints. She made fudge that supplied 4 stores by 1936 and had its own storefront by 1942, starting with a candy thermometer that cost 35 cents. She taught reading to mill workers 2 evenings a week, charging $1 a month for materials, building a network of loyalty that sustained every other side hustle she ran. Number 1. The promissory note and personal credit business. At the top of this list because it is the most forgotten, the most powerful, and the most completely erased method on this entire countdown is the personal credit operation. Your great-grandfather was not a banker. He was a hardware merchant. But he understood that in a neighborhood where the banks had closed or refused to lend to working people, the ability to extend trustworthy credit was worth more than any product he could sell. He maintained a ledger. When a neighbor needed $5 to cover a bill and had no cash, he lent it at no interest for 30 days, or at a simple flat fee of 25 cents for 90 days. He did not do this charitably. He did it because the neighbor who owed him money bought hardware from him first for the next 2 years, sent his relatives, and never once disputed an invoice. The credit was the marketing. The loyalty was the return. He kept that ledger for 23 years. He never lost a dollar he could not absorb, because he never lent to anyone he did not know. The knowledge of how to run a personal credit operation based on community knowledge and character assessment, rather than a credit score, is one of the most valuable things this generation has never been taught. The banks learned it first. Then they made sure nobody else remembered it. 30 methods, all documented, all functional, and every single one of them either directly applicable today or the ancestor of a business model that someone in this country is currently running profitably. The Depression did not create these methods. It revealed them. These were the normal economic behaviors of Americans who understood that money is not made by waiting for an employer or a government to hand it to you. It is made by knowing something useful, being willing to do it consistently, and building the reputation that makes people seek you out. Your great-grandmother knew this. She knew it so well she never thought of it as knowledge. It was just Tuesday. If your family had a side hustle during the Depression, a route, a trade, a skill that kept things together during the hard years, leave it in the comments. This channel exists to document what was nearly forgotten. You might be the last person who remembers it. And if you want to see what else was erased, the channel page has the full archive. Untold American rights, the laws they removed, the money they buried,